Let's get right into it. Number 8. The right to party. It's 1920, and alcohol just became illegal in America. But it wasn't really illegal if you were rich. When Prohibition kicked in, the wealthy had already stocked up. Rich folks had wine cellars bigger than most people's houses, filled to the brim with fancy booze, and the law actually let them keep it all. The government said alcohol is evil and will destroy society. Unless you bought it before 1920, then it's totally fine. So while regular folks were getting arrested for a bottle of beer, the rich were sipping aged whiskey in their mansions. Rich people didn't just have their own private stashes. They had their own private clubs. Public drinking was illegal, but private clubs were in a gray area. These weren't your average speakeasies where you might go blind from badly made moonshine. These were fancy establishments with crystal chandeliers, live jazz bands, and imported liquor. Cops knew exactly where these places were. They just didn't care because the right kind of people went there. If you were poor and wanted a drink, you had to risk drinking something made in someone's bathtub. Sometimes it was just bad booze. Other times it was straight-up poison. The government even started poisoning industrial alcohol on purpose, knowing people were drinking it. They figured if they made it deadly enough, people would stop drinking. They didn't stop. They just died. Thousands of people died from drinking poisoned alcohol during Prohibition. Rich folks drinking their pre-1920 champagne did not. Laws are like fancy restaurants. If you've got enough money, there's always a table available. Number 7. Who wears the pants? Imagine getting arrested because you're wearing pants. Back in the 1800s, if you were a woman wearing pants, you could end up in jail. Cities like San Francisco and Chicago had actual laws against women dressing like men. France had a law banning women from wearing pants that wasn't officially repealed until 2013. Everything changed when rich people started doing it. Wealthy socialites and movie stars started rocking pants in the 1920s and 30s. When actress Marlene Dietrich showed up in Paris wearing a men's suit in 1932, the police were told to arrest her. But because she was rich and famous, she became a fashion icon instead. Suddenly, what was illegal became bold and daring. Meanwhile, working-class women who wore pants for practical reasons were still getting harassed. In 1938, a Los Angeles teacher named Helen Hulick was sent home from court for wearing pants. She was there as a witness. The judge told her to come back in a dress. She came back the next day in pants again. The judge threw her in jail for 5 days. But once wealthy women made pants haute couture, the rules started to change for everyone. Number 6. Placing a bet. Around 1905, if you wanted to bet on a horse race, you'd have to sneak into a dark alley and find a sketchy guy. Today, you can bet on your phone while sitting on the toilet. It wasn't some grand moral awakening that changed this. It was rich people getting bored. Back in the 1860s, Monaco was broke. Princess Caroline had an idea: build a fancy casino and get rich Europeans to dump their money there. They called it Monte Carlo. It became the place where Europe's elite could gamble responsibly. Meanwhile, if a poor person was caught gambling, they'd end up in jail. But the rich folks made gambling look glamorous. Suddenly, it wasn't a dirty vice. It was sophisticated entertainment. American millionaires saw this and decided to do it back home. That's how Las Vegas was born. Wealthy investors built massive casinos, hired fancy entertainers, and suddenly gambling wasn't just legal. It was a tourist attraction, and the government loved it because they could tax it. Nothing makes something legal faster than the government figuring out how to make money from it. Today, the gambling industry is worth hundreds of billions, and states are practically begging people to gamble through official lottery apps. The same activity that could get your great-grandpa thrown in jail is now advertised during Sunday football. Number 5. The freedom to divorce. For centuries, breaking up with your spouse was literally illegal, unless you were rich enough to buy a new law. If you wanted a divorce, you needed your own personal act of parliament. The government had to create a whole new law just for your breakup. The process was so expensive that only the super wealthy could afford it. In England, it would cost about £3,000, which is roughly $200,000 in today's money. And that's just the filing fee. King Henry VIII wanted a divorce so badly, he created an entire new religion when the Pope said no. In America, each state had different rules, which led to divorce tourism. Rich people would temporarily move to states with easier divorce laws, get divorced, then move back home. It was basically a luxury vacation package. Come to South Dakota, get a tan, see Mount Rushmore, ditch your spouse. While the wealthy were jurisdiction shopping for their designer divorces, regular folks were stuck in horrible marriages. Some people had to hire someone to pretend to be their lover, just so they could get caught and have a legal reason to split up. It wasn't until rich people made divorce scandalous and fashionable that laws started changing for everyone. By the 1970s, most places had no-fault divorce, meaning you could just say, "This isn't working," and bounce. Number 4. The sin of lending. For most of human history, charging interest on a loan was not just illegal, it was considered a sin called usury. The church said it was like stealing time from God. If you got caught, you could be excommunicated. When you died, they wouldn't even bury you in holy ground. But powerful banking families like the Medici weren't about to let eternal damnation get in the way of profits. They came up with creative workarounds. Instead of charging interest, they'd require gifts from borrowers, or they'd write the loan in one currency and demand repayment in another at a profitable exchange rate. It wasn't interest, just a currency exchange fee. The church wasn't fooled, but these banking families were too powerful to touch. They were lending money to kings and popes themselves. It's hard to excommunicate someone when they're funding your new cathedral. Eventually, the church had to decide if usury was really that bad. And just like that, charging interest went from a mortal sin to the foundation of our entire economy. Your credit card, your mortgage, that payday loan place down the street, it's all usury. Number 3. The gentleman's bloody knuckles. Imagine it's 1850 and you're caught in a fist fight. If you're poor, you're going to jail. But if you're rich, that's just gentlemanly sport. Back then, boxing was basically two guys beating each other until one couldn't stand. No gloves, few rules, just pure violence. The fights happened in secret locations, and police would raid them, arresting everyone they could, unless, of course, important people were there. Rich folks got really into watching these illegal fights and would bet huge amounts of money, but they got tired of running from the cops like common criminals, so they did what rich people do best. They changed the rules. Enter the Marquis of Queensberry. He helped create a set of rules that made boxing civilized, adding gloves, rounds, and a referee. Suddenly, it wasn't a brutal blood sport. It was a noble art of self-defense. The same cops who were busting up fights yesterday were now providing security for boxing exhibitions. Ironically, those gloves actually made the sport more dangerous. Bare knuckles hurt the person throwing the punch, so fights ended faster. But with gloves, you could punch harder and longer without breaking your hands, leading to more head trauma over time. They didn't make it safer, they just made it fancier. Number 2. The crime of owning gold. In 1933, President Franklin D. Roosevelt made it a crime for American citizens to own gold. Not just gold bars, but any significant amount of coins or certificates. The punishment was up to 10 years in prison. You could get locked up longer for having gold than for robbing a bank. The country was in the middle of the Great Depression, and the government worried the entire financial system would collapse. Americans were forced to sell their gold to the government for $20.67 per ounce. Right after collecting all this gold, the government raised the official price to $35 per ounce. While regular folks were forced to give up their savings, the wealthy found ways around it. The law made an exception for rare and unusual coins. Suddenly, every gold coin in a rich person's possession became a rare collector's item. Jewelry was also exempt, so high society parties were dripping in gold. It wasn't just fashion, it was a personal Fort Knox. The super rich just moved their gold to foreign banks. This went on for over 40 years until 1974, when the ban was finally lifted, largely due to pressure from wealthy investors who wanted to trade gold legally again, the very same right they'd never really given up in the first place. Number 1. Collecting forbidden art. Taking art from places like Egypt or Greece wasn't just illegal, it was a crime against a nation's identity. Then the wealthy elite got involved, and suddenly, stealing priceless artifacts became preserving culture. In 1801, a British nobleman named Lord Elgin looked at the Parthenon in Greece and decided the marble sculptures would look great in his house. He removed about half of the surviving sculptures from one of the most important buildings in human history by getting a vaguely worded permission slip from the Ottoman Empire, which was occupying Greece at the time. It's like asking your friend's temporary roommate if you can take their TV. Instead of being arrested as a thief, Lord Elgin sold these priceless artifacts to the British Museum. They became known as the Elgin Marbles. Rich collectors did this all over the world, hiring so-called archaeologists who were basically grave robbers with fancy titles. Many of these stolen pieces ended up in museums where they were transformed from stolen goods into preserved cultural heritage. It's like if you stole a car, put it in your garage, and called it a transportation museum. The British Museum alone holds so many stolen artifacts that at this point, it's basically the world's fanciest evidence locker. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.